Finally, in SEAL training, there's a bell. All you have to do to quit is ring the bell. Ring the bell, and you no longer have to wake up at 5 o'clock. Ring the bell, and you no longer have to do the runs, the obstacle course, the PT, and you no longer have to endure the hardships of training. If you want to change the world, don't ever ring the bell.
You are listening to the Kill the Quit Podcast Hour, presented by Kill Clip Performance Drinks.
Enjoy drinking Kill Clip after sweaty workouts, big rides, full rounds, long days, longer nights, or whenever you feel the need to get back up to full speed.
Kill Clip Performance Drinks for Warriors. Ignite, endure, recover. And now, Mark Zinno.
Welcome into another episode of Kill the Quit, brought to you by Kill Clip. I'm your host, Mark Zinno. This week's guest is a former Navy SEAL, spent 10 years in the SEALs, and he is now the only Navy SEAL to become a NASCAR driver in history. That's correct. He's working his way up to NASCAR currently in the K&N West Series, and he is Taylor Canfield here on Kill the Quit. Taylor, welcome. Thank you for joining me.
Hey, appreciate you guys having me, man. This is a distinct honor that, I've had listened to so many of my other colleagues go through, and I appreciate you guys having me, man. This is great.
No, absolutely. Just an amazing story. And again, not many people grow up with the aspirations of being a NASCAR driver when they're little kids. Maybe they do. I just haven't met any of them. So, but we will get to all that. But let's start back kind of in your early life, younger days, how you grew up. Were you a big athlete? Were you a big, guy who was into the military, or did all this just come along later in life?
For me, there was always, the athleticism part of the family. My whole family was a bunch of swimmers, right? So, my older sister swam, my younger sister swam, my younger brother swam, and it was, kind of the progression of the family, if you will, you weren't going to get out of it kind of thing. And I remember, as a kid, going into it, and, initially I didn't like it. And it was, what you had to do, every, Tuesday and Thursday you got practice, or every Monday, Wednesday, Friday you got practice. And I remember dreading those days. I'm like, oh no, we got practice again tonight. And, it was, you're going to do it, or that's it. You're going to start getting punished at the house. So, it was kind of one of those things you just did. But after so long of doing it, you end up liking it. And for me, I ended up loving swimming, and it was, blessings in disguise, if you will, kind of thing.
Sure.
And ended up being a great thing for me. But and I did baseball for a few years. I did football for a few years in high school. I was never good at either one of them. Swimming is kind of the only thing that I was decent at, and it was because I did it so long that I had better be good at it.
Right.
So, it was, I can't say that there was ever any aspiration of joining the military when I was growing up. I was, at an early age, I was kind of the man of the house, and it was, 10, 11 years old. You're responsible for everything from mowing to the grass to, fixing the air conditioner, and, anything else that goes wrong kind of on the outside of the house, you got to get in there and even inside of the house stuff. So, I was kind of a handyman at an early age, and worked a bunch of different random jobs. Before I could legally work, I'd go and I'd paint fences and mow lawns, and that was, my income at that point. And then once I finally got to 14, 15 years old, where you can start legally working, I ended up being a lifeguard for the state parks there. It's crazy. In the middle of Colorado, we have a swim beach, but so I worked as a lifeguard there, and that was a ton of fun. And but I just never felt myself going anywhere, and
Sure.
It kind of led into my junior and senior year in high school, and it's like, all right, what are you going to do? And in my town, military is kind of one of those options.
Yeah.
College is the ultimate option. That's what everyone aspired to do, was, go further your education, go to college. Because, I'm not going to say a lot of people don't do it, but a lot of people might do a semester or 2 or 3, and then they find a job and they settle into it. And, you know what, I don't really need to finish my degree. And that's kind of how my hometown progressed. And, a very blue collar town. And so, for a while, and actually growing up, I had always told, my dad I was going to go be a lawyer, which is crazy to think about, when I sit here now and look back why I wanted to be a lawyer. I honestly have no idea, but it got to a point for me where, I saw my older sister go to college and, racked up that debt. And I said, hey, I don't want that debt, but I want college. So how do I do this? And sure enough, guess what? Military will actually pay for your college. And I said, that's it. Then, that's the plan. We're going to go do the military. I had no idea what branch, I had no idea what job, but, my overarching plan was, we're going in the military. And, as soon as my mom heard that, it was, man, you would have thought that your world had just turned upside down. She was not happy with me, because at that time, there were a lot of, news stories on our guys, primarily Army and Marines, going overseas, and just, catastrophes happening. And that's what you heard on the news, right? We didn't hear these, success stories. We were still hunting Osama bin Laden. We hadn't, really, seen the results of our labor yet. And so all we heard about on the news were the tragedies. And, bless my mom's heart, that's automatically what popped into her head. That's, oh, you don't have a plan, you're going in the military. Guess what? You're going to be on the news soon. We're going to have to, we're going to have to get the notification that you were killed over there. And it was, it was heartbreaking at the same time, but, kind of infuriating, because she didn't want me to do it. And it was, a lot of tension there for a while when I didn't have a set plan to get into the military. It was just, I want to do military because they're going to pay for my college. And Mom was like, how stupid that sounds. Looking back, yeah, now I do. But at the time, I thought it was a good idea. And
well, wait,
yeah,
why does it sound stupid now?
Well, because generally, I hadn't even talked to a recruiter at that point.
Sure.
And so once you go into a recruiter and you talk to them, and you would tell a recruiter that, they're like, well, no, you got to test. Second, you got to pick a job. There's actually a plan and a process to it. I had no idea that existed. And I'm like, I'm just going to do the military, so, if I was, smarter, I probably would have done my research and figured out, hey, what do I actually like doing? And what do I want to shoot for as a job in the military, So it would have been probably a little bit better if I had researched it and figured out what I actually wanted to do, what interested me, rather than just what makes the money. Everyone in the military gets paid the same. So you might as well pick a job that, you think you're going to like. And it came down to my junior year, and a buddy of mine was a Navy SEAL fanboy, just, to say the least, to say it nicely. He had done all the research, read the books, everything else. I had never read a single book on the SEALs. And this story in buds got me in plenty of trouble. But, after I had told him my plan, hey, I'm doing military, he's like, have you ever thought about being a SEAL? And I said, no, I have not. And he's like, well, I think you should check them out. And I'm like, why not? So, I went home and did a very small amount of research, enough to see what SEALs were doing at the time and kind of comprehend what I might be getting myself into. And at that point, I'm like, hey, you know what? I think we're gonna do that. That sounds like a good plan because I had no plan before this. So this is my new plan, and we're gonna do it. And of course, once you tell people, hey, last night I decided I'm gonna be a Navy SEAL, they're like, oh, that's cool. So what do you actually want to do? And I'm like, no, that's the plan right now. There is no plan B. We're gonna go be a Navy SEAL. And it's funny because that story in Buds got me into trouble because during first phase, it happens all through Buds, but first phase is the real kick in the groin area. But so we'd have room inspections, and the instructors would come through and, all right, hey, what's your story? And we had a lot of, we call them legacy guys. So these are guys that have had dads or uncles or, grandfathers that were military, or more specifically, prior SEALs who, our current instructors were put through Buds by. That was our instructors. And so we call those legacy stories, and the instructors love those. If I got to go through Buds and meet one of my instructor's kids, as a Buds instructor, meet one of my students, and their dad was my instructor, it would have been kind of nostalgic and all. But anyway, so they'd ask me my story, and I told them that, and they're the very first time I remember it very distinctly. He goes, that story really sucks. And I'm like, well, I mean, I guess I can see why that sucks. As a student, you don't say anything to them. You're just like, oh yeah, you're like, you acknowledge they're right no matter what. You pretend that they're right. And he's like, that story sucks. Go get Wet and Sandy for it. And I'm like, oh, come on, man. I'm like, all right, whatever. And he goes, hey, and next time, change your damn story. I said, oh, okay. So, you go jump in the ocean, roll in the sand, come back in your room, and all your hard work is gone from cleaning the day before and staying up all night cleaning to pass. So the next week, again, you have room inspections, and a whole nother instructor comes into my room, different instructor. All right, what's your story? And I'd thought about it for a good week. I had a whole week to think about it. And with the ocean, the cold ocean and the sand to motivate me, I was like, oh, I've been watching Charlie Sheen and stabbing pillows since I was 6. And I've been wanting to do this my whole life. And he's like, oh yeah, that's awesome. And lo and behold, the instructor from the previous week was standing outside my door listening, and
oh man,
kind of pops his head around the corner and he goes, hey, he's lying to you. And the other instructor looks at me and goes, are you lying to me? And I'm like, well, yeah, but he told me to change my story. And he goes, well, now you can go get Wet and Sandy for lying to me. And I'm like, oh man. So I was like, all right, well, that's how this is going to go. And, after that, I reverted back to telling my real story and just assuming that I was going to go get Wet and Sandy for it. So that was how that went down.
Well, look, I mean, everybody's experience in Buds is dynamically different, even though you're all going through the same thing because the perspective is different. But let me ask you, did all the years you were swimming help you when you got to Buds?
Oh, man, tremendously. So, a huge part of Buds is being comfortable in the water.
Right.
So much of what we do is in the water, and, not maybe necessarily in first phase, but, second phase is all dive phase. And there you've got to be comfortable because, you're going to be on a device we call the Dregger. It's a rebreather, and it's a diving device where you're going to be underneath, an aircraft carrier, swimming around a submarine at night, with, the only electronics you have are a watch to time yourself, to time your legs that you swim, so you've gone the right amount of time, and through that time you can calculate distance. But you could not see your face if you hold it an inch from your mask, and it is the darkest place you've ever seen, and it really, it will test how comfortable you are in the water. And for me, swimming my entire life, the water was, there's other things in buds where no matter how much you train, you're not going to be comfortable with it. And that's like, a pool comp in second phase where you're underwater, the instructors will come down and they will, mess with all your breathing apparatus and make sure that you can't breathe out of it anymore. And so you're in the bottom of this 15-foot pool. You don't have air, but in order to get that air, you've got to go through a very, very strict set of procedures, to be able to start breathing again. Even though, sometimes what they'll do is they'll simply take your mouthpiece out and they'll tuck it under the back of your tanks. And all you got to do is reach behind your tanks, pop your mouthpiece out, stick it back in, you can start breathing. However, there's, a set of probably 10 steps before that if you do not do, you will fail the test. And they won't tell you failed the test until you run out of air and, bolt for the surface, or they'll continue testing you, and you get to the surface and you're like, holy cow, they didn't stop me. And you get to the surface and they're like, fail, get out. And you're like, oh no, like I just did all that and I failed, and you don't know what you failed. You got to get back out on the pool deck, sit there and think about it. And you're like, oh shoot. So, there's certain things that you're just not going to be comfortable with. The human body, once you start running out of air, you're not going to be comfortable with it. However, you've got to put your mind in the right place to know that, even though my body's reacting to this, I know I have enough air to complete my task at hand. And that's where it takes, your mental state coming in to reinforce your physical state of, hey, I can do this. It's not as bad as it's not as bad as my body thinks it is. So we're going to push through and keep doing it. But yeah, no, swimming, I wouldn't change anything in my, childhood besides maybe running more. I never ran before buds. So that was, I don't know why I thought I was going to be able to go in there and just run. And I did, but, I think maybe my longest run before buds was maybe a mile, you know what I mean? And it was never like a time mile. Yeah. So I again, man,
it's funny, Taylor, a lot of SEALs, when you talk to them before going to, they either have one or two, it's either they can swim and don't run, or they can run and don't swim. Like it's you never find, it's very few I've run into the candidates who does both really well.
Right.
So
yeah.
It's just
that's funny.
Quirky little thing. He is Taylor Canfield, former Navy SEAL and currently a NASCAR driver. We'll take a time out when we come back. Taylor's time in the SEALs, his deployments, and the future of him becoming a NASCAR driver. We'll do all that coming up next. This is Kill the Quit, brought to you by Kill Cliff. We'll be right back.
You're listening to the Kill the Quit podcast hour, presented by Kill Cliff Performance Drinks.
Kill Cliff, performance drinks for warriors to get you up, get you through, and get you back to full speed.
And now, back to the show with host Mark Zinno.
Welcome back to Kill the Quit, brought to you by Kill Cliff. I'm your host, Mark Zinno. This week's guest, Taylor Canfield, former Navy SEAL, currently a NASCAR driver, even about to go get his helicopter pilot's license. A lot to unpack with Taylor. And last left off, his time in buds. Anybody who's listened to Kill the Quit knows I asked this a lot about the Navy SEALs, but because I just love the variety in the answers. But there's a bell that you can ring at buds, and you basically DOR, drop on request.
Yeah.
And I always am curious to hear what that bell did for, each candidate going through buds. What was your reaction to it? And especially if it was somebody you knew, because you get kind of close with the guys that you're training with side by side every single day. And, what was that like for you when you heard that bell? What did it do for you mentally?
I'll tell you what, man, I visually avoided the sight of that bell like the plague, like my
Really?
eyeballs were going to rot out of my head if I looked at it. And coming into it, I just, I didn't know the significance of the bell. And, once you get there, hour one, day one, and you hear that thing, it is a constant noise, the first week that you are in training. Cause guys, man, the first time you get wet and sandy at 4 a.m., your very first PT, and, you go and jump in the freezing cold, of course we started in January, so it's as cold as Coronado gets. And, people from, the Midwest and the North are like, oh, it doesn't get cold there. But listen, that offshore breeze, when there's moisture in the air, it will cut right through you, and it's cold. That water temperature drops out there. So, day 1 hour when you go hit the surf and you come back, you're full of sand and you're motivated until, an instructor comes and sticks a hose in your face, and you're like, okay, well, this can't last long. And he stays there and he stays there and he stays there. And then for, because you were distracted, with this hose in your face, you weren't, doing the exercise right. And then, the lead instructor in charge of the exercises calls you out. And then you've got 3 instructors standing around you, hovering, yelling at you for everything you're doing. And you're like, you know what? Maybe this isn't something that, I want to do forever. And that bell, I tell you what, it is like a constant hum. You'll hear dings. And so I avoided the sight of it. The sound you're never going to be able to avoid. But I tell you one thing that really stuck with me when we were in first phase is I had an officer that was in charge of my boat crew. And I started, after a few days, I started to really look up to the guy because he was very articulate, well-spoken, had a great collegiate background. And so I started to look up to the guy. And we were in Hell Week. And I'm trying to... No, you know what? I don't think it was Hell Week. Anyway, we do rock portage with the boats. And it's at night. And it's, again, it's cold. You got that offshore breeze cutting through you, and it's miserable. And we went over the rocks, did what we were supposed to do, and we were kind of standing there, and we kind of felt the back of the boat drop. And we looked back, and, our boat officer in charge left, and we're like, oh, maybe he's, I don't know, going to ask a question, or maybe he's got to go to the bathroom or something like that. And maybe, 30 seconds to a minute later, you hear that bell ring and you're like, nah, like that was someone else. And the instructors get a kick out of it when somebody rings and it's, somebody that's made it that far, and you might have, they made a distinction for themselves, like this guy, he was a collegiate athlete and everything else. And then the instructors would be like, oh, Lieutenant JG, whoever, rang the bell, and you're like, no way. Like, you've got to be kidding me. That guy just rung the bell. Like, I looked up to that guy, and then you kind of, for a second, I was like, wow, what am I going to do? If that guy that I looked up to, just rang out, holy crap. Like, you kind of felt like you lost a friend there for a second, and then you just keep moving on and pushing through. And, really what it came down for me is you realize, you can't judge a book by its cover, because it's, some of the most unsuspecting guys that will make it through buds, and some of the guys that you come in day one and you're like, that dude, if I follow that guy, we'll make it through, and that dude's gone on day 3. So, it's tough to judge a book by its cover, especially when it comes down to buds. And once you realize buds is, in my honest opinion, Buzz is a giant mental game. Physically, I was not the most fit guy going through. Obviously I swam my whole life. I played football, but I was never big into lifting and all that other stuff. So going through Buds, I was I was the fat kid going through Buds, to put it the least, and it was a huge eye opener when you can connect the dots that Buds is a 90% mental game. And when I say 90%, don't get me wrong, physically it is the hardest thing you will ever do. However, listen, if I can do it physically, if my body can do it physically, anyone's body can do it physically. And then there's exceptions. Yeah, if you tear a muscle going through Buds, it's a bad day, and hopefully you get rolled, and hopefully you get a chance to recover and step back into the game and get back at it. But for the most part, Buds is meant to break your body, and at that point, when your body is broken, what makes a SEAL is their mental ability to override the system, simply put, and continue to push your body beyond what it thinks it can do and beyond what you thought it can do. Your ability to say, hey, you know what? No, we're going to keep going because that's what's required of us. That's what makes us, that's really what it comes down to, separating a SEAL from somebody that either didn't make it through or hasn't gone through yet. So, and there's totally other, there's other branches, there's other special forces, there's,
Right.
Civilians, ultra endurance athletes that do the same thing. But, for me, it was an eye opener when I finally got to realize, hey, this is all a mental game. If your mind is in the correct place to be able to, combat that and play the games, you're good to go. So, but it's not easy getting your mind to that place. I struggled plenty of times getting my mind to be able to override the system like that. So
Yeah, I mean, look, there's a select group of people you talk to who are SEALs that have the mental game down going in. They've mentally prepared themselves and feel like that they're every position that they're in. Just some of the physical stuff was tougher for them, and then there's the flip side, like you say. Some of the physical stuff was easy, but it's the mental challenge that you have to get through as you go through this just incredibly arduous process. So I'm always curious to see the approach from people. And I mean, when you look back at your time in Buds and everything that you had to go through, I mean, clearly you're mentally stronger now than you were prior to the whole thing. But what within that scope of mental toughness really got honed and focused during your time at Buds?
Oh man, just how much more the human body is capable of once you are able to get to, we hear these amazing heroic war stories, and it's just almost unbelievable when you read the story. Guys getting shot just multiple times. Another SEAL, he was shot 17 times and still got himself to the helicopter. And you read that and you're like, how? That's kind of really the overarching just giant question mark in your phrase. There's how? No way. And it just comes down to realizing and then knowing and having confidence that the human body's capable of just ungodly things. It is crazy what the human body can actually do when pushed to that point. And generally it's detrimental when pushed to that point. So we don't find it often. You know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah,
It's not healthy to find that often. So, but that's the point of Buds, is you're going to get there. Your body is going to be broken, and Buds wants to see that you can push beyond that, because that's going to be exactly what's required of you, or possibly required of you on the battlefield. So, when you can look back and you can really appreciate the process as a whole, was a really, cool thing, I'll call it, and really educational thing for me. So that was definitely one of the highlights for me.
So in your 10-year SEAL career, when it was all said and done, did any of that mental toughness that you had to learn to go through in buds help you actually in combat and on deployments and things of that nature?
Oh yeah, and deployments, God, what an up and down time. So yes, to answer your question 100%, and they know that. So this, it's not a guessing game. This is, there's a science to the whole thing, and it's because the guys that go to war, they come back and they say, hey, here's how we need to improve this. Here's what we need to work on to make the next generation of warriors that much more effective. And so it's a constant learning process. There's no one set of guidelines or rules that's going to work forever. Warfare is constantly changing, and
Yep.
It changes fast, and the enemy's smart. So it's great that we have smart guys in that go over. They see it, they come back, and that's kind of one of the things. You're expected to go be an instructor and give back to the community that just gave you so much, and by giving back, they want you to bring what you learned and what you think needs to be improved and implement it, and train the next generation to be that much better than you were, or that much more prepared than you were before they go. And that's why the special forces and the SEALs are the tip of the spear. That's why we can go overseas and be so effective in such a little time with little resources, little manpower, and go get amazing things done. So
Was combat mentally tougher for you than the mental toughness you didn't have prior to going to buds?
No, combat itself, no. The deployment, yes, because there's certain times on deployment that you
Are bored out of your skull?
100% bored out of your skull. You're thinking of the most ridiculous things to keep yourself occupied. You guys are doing like hallway races on,
Tricycles or whatever you could find. Anything with wheels that you can move down the road. Yeah.
Man, anything that you can find in there to keep yourself occupied. And so, in that moment, yeah, it's fun and you're having a good time. And then there's other times that you're, whatever, family, stuff back home is, affecting your mental capacity. And then, you just, hey, that's what you're thinking about the next day. And then you're sitting there in your room and you're like, I'm over here. I can't help what's going on back there. They're mad at me because I'm over here. And it's, it's a vicious cycle. And that was really a drain, and I think it's a drain for a lot of guys, because there's stuff that's going to happen with your family, and, you prepare as best you can, but sometimes there's things you can't prepare for, family deaths, unfortunately, kids getting sick. And, there's this stories that happen while you're on deployment. And, thankfully there was, nothing life-changing for me that happened to my family while I was gone. But there are guys that have to deal with that mental strain along with still having to be, an effective warrior on the battlefield. And that's definitely, a mental drain when you look, sitting here, I can't help the situation back home. And this is only month 2 out of 6 or 8 or 10, and it was, that's definitely where the mental toughness comes back in, because you are 100% expected to come as your best warrior every day, when, maybe not in the morning, if you got to wake up and, it takes you a little bit of time to get going. Well, guess what? You need to develop whatever you need to do to get to your 100%. You've got time to do it. But when it comes down time to get on the helicopter and you're expected to be at your best, you have to do it. There's no two ways about it. You got to be there. So.
It's interesting. You mentioned that you would race things up and down the hallway. Was that the beginning of your NASCAR career in its earliest stages?
Oh no, that was the curbing effect. That was trying to do what and thankfully, we get to employ motorized vehicles of all different sorts overseas, so that also helps a little bit. But my love and passion for motorsports is deeply seated in my DNA, thanks to my mom and my dad. So that was, something, something I was born with, and I've never been able to get past it since, and finally get to pursue it. So,
well, we'll get to that story and finish up your time in the SEALs when we come back. Taylor Canfield is our guest here on Kill the Quit, brought to you by Killcliff. I'm your host, Mark Zinno. We'll be back with more here. Don't go anywhere.
You are listening to the Kill the Quit Podcast Hour, presented by Killcliff Performance Drinks, proud partner of the Navy SEAL Foundation.
Welcome back in to Kill the Quit, brought to you by Killcliff. I'm your host, Mark Zinno. This week's guest, Taylor Canfield, former Navy SEAL, and currently the first and ever only Navy SEAL to become a NASCAR driver, and we're going to get to that in just a moment. You spent 10 years in the SEALs, and I'm curious as to why you decided to call it a career at that point in time, and think back to when your mother was objecting to you joining the service. Was she relieved when you finally got out?
Crazy transition. She had 10 years to think about this, and I don't know if she was happy that I was getting out. I think she
wanted you to stay.
I can't say she wanted me to stay. I never actually asked her. I never got permission to leave again. I never got permission to join. So, no, I think she took immense pride in, the accomplishments of just being a SEAL as a whole, and, being able to, tell people about her, her oldest boy once it came down to it. And, I took pride in the fact that she could take pride in that. So that was definitely cool. And, it weighed on my mind. I'm like, man, this is one of the hardest things in the world to accomplish. And I'm here saying, maybe this isn't what I want to do for, the rest of my career, or the rest of my life. And, it takes a lot of thinking, and, there is a lot of second guess in there. Well, for me personally, there was a lot of second guess. I've talked to several other guys, and some of them are, totally intent. Hey, I'm getting out and I know what I'm doing. Other guys are, hey, I don't want to get out. I enjoy this lifestyle, and this is what I'm going to do until they kick me out. And then I think there's guys like me where you're on the fence, and, there's always goods and bads to your service. And I'll say this, without my service, had I not done the SEALs, I would not be where I'm at today. There is absolutely no program that was within my scope of knowledge that would have put my, mental game where it's at today to be able to do what I want to do. And so I am forever and eternally grateful for, what the SEAL teams have given me as a person, and, how I matured, and how I was forced to mature. So that was, a big part of, hey, wow, this, I've gained so much from this community, and now I'm thinking about getting out and going and doing something else. Is that the right choice,
Did you talk to your teammates about your, question them about thinking about leaving, and what did they say?
Yeah. I question, the two guys that I talked to about it are still in today. So of course, their opinion was, a little bit more biased in the fact that, I don't think they had thought about what they would do if they were, to get out. At that point in time, their mind was set on doing 20, and they're still doing it. So their opinion was a little bit skewed towards, hey, you might want to stay in, kind of thing. And for me, it was, man, it was a constant pull of every weekend, every little bit of off time I had. I'm thinking about going fast. I'm like, man, we're going to go buy this, crap box car off of Craigslist, and we're going to strip it and go race it in this series until the engine takes a crap, and then we're going to ditch it, and we'll look for another car for a different series, and we're going to go do that kind of thing, like spending your as soon as you get out of work, you're like, all right, what are we going to go race today? And for me, it came to a point where the Navy, I'm not going to say they restructured, but they had to get a lot of stuff back in order during my 10 years. So when I first went in, deployments were long. All three of my deployments were far longer than they were supposed to be. Our first one in Afghanistan was, I think we were right around 8 months. Then I went straight to Iraq, and that was, I think we ended up being in Iraq for 10 to 11 months. And then again, the last Afghanistan deployment, that was almost 8 months. And it's not supposed to be that way. In the special operations community, at least for SEALs, your allotted deployment time is 6 months. And by these varying lengths and times, it was screwing up rotations for the broader naval special warfare community.
Right.
And finally it came down to them saying, hey, no, you know what, we've got to get this back online. And from the time your boots leave the ground to the time they touch the ground again needs to be 6 months. And so that was a whole lot of restructure part that happened while I was in. And it came down to the Navy saying, hey, we have to know now. And this was a good year out from my 10-year mark, when my enlistment was up. And I thought I was going to be able to make my decision there. Like, we got to know now because we have a quota to fill. And if you're not going to be a part of that quota, we need to know. And if you say no now, it's going to be hard to take it back. And so I got this, curveball thrown at me. Like, I need to decide now, long before I'm getting out, whether I'm getting out. And it was a long night for me, but I came back, and really what it came down to for me was there were other aspirations that I wanted to go pursue. And hey, it took me saying, sorry, but at 10 years is where I draw the line. So that was, it was a tough decision.
Well, but the thing is, and people need to understand this in the special operations community in general, it's not something you can divert your attention away from. Not if you want to be successful, not if you want to do it at a high level. It's hard to serve two masters in that sense in the special ops community, because either you're you're all in and all your chips are on the table all the time, or if you don't want to be all in, well, then you have to walk away, because more than anything, and you understand this, obviously, it's your decision, but if you're only half in, the guy next to you bears the brunt of that, right? It's not even 100%. You so much. It's the guy next to you who has to pick up that slack or carry the extra burden. And there's so much to do. It's not that guys don't want to do it for you. It's just that then they aren't being able to pull their weight by having to pull yours. And it's a trickle-down effect. I
couldn't have said it better myself, because that's, it's a team effort. And again, just like you said, if you can't, commit 100% of what you need to mentally and physically to make that team what it needs to be, then hopefully you realize it before the team realizes it and says, hey, you need to go. Most guys are smart enough where they're like, you know what, I think it's time that this is my transition point, and I don't know a single team guy that's not grateful, a single special operations guy that's not grateful for, what they were given up until that point. But, right. Life is such, and I don't regret it. I don't regret a single second of my service. Like I said earlier, I wouldn't be where I'm at without it today. I couldn't do what I want to do without it. But, we're doing good things in the future, and I have a yearning to pay back, anything I can to that community. So 4 years ago, I started a nonprofit, and we do adrenaline therapy for combat wounded guys. So anything from off-road racing, on-road racing, skydiving, you name it. If it got your blood pumping before your injury, then we're gonna, by God, we'll find a way to do it and help you do it after your injury. So that's a very small way that I feel like I can help kind of pay back the community. And I think a lot of guys do that. There's a sense that, hey, it's time to pay back the community that gave me so much.
Well, it's taking care of the man next to you. It's an extension, whether you're in combat or not. It's about taking care of the person next to you. You had mentioned that you had other aspirations. At that point in time, did you know it had to do with racing?
I knew it had to do with racing. I did not know what or how or when or where, but I knew I had to get my speed fix somewhere in there. And it's funny because the last 4 years I was in, I made this giant, huge push to finally get the education that I told myself I was going to get first coming in. You come in and, the SEAL teams are so overwhelming that you don't even want to think about college or doing school. There are guys that do it, and it blew my mind seeing them do it at that time, as new guys and one platoon guys, because there's so much more going on, and then they can still dedicate time to school. I was like, no, I'm good. I'll wait. And so my last 4 years, I made this huge push and ended up getting my bachelor's and my master's. And, it was business oriented. So I said, yeah, I'm going to get out and I'm going to do business. And we can kind of see where this pattern comes in, where I said I want to do business. And so we start going to these mentors, and they're like, okay, what in business do you want to do? I was like, I don't have any idea. I don't know what there is. Can you name off some jobs and I'll tell you if that sounds good or not? And they're like, how about you tell us what you're interested in doing? I'm like, I don't know what there is to do in business. So it was, kind of the same pattern as when I went into the SEALs, where I didn't know. And it took me, from that year that Navy said, hey, are you staying or are you going? I said, I'm out. The year until I actually got out, I was, scurrying to try and find what I wanted to do in business, through some outside one's called Elite Meet, and they help guys just, they take special operations guys and they transition them into the private sector, whether it be business, tech, finance, whatever you want to do. They gather these mentors and they put you out there. And every time I'd go to a mentor, okay, what do you want to do in business? I'm like, I don't know what there is to do. And it came back to, okay, what do you really want to do? And I'm like, oh, you really want to know what? I want to go race cars. They're like, okay, so why don't you go do that? I'm like, because it's not really sustainable. I need to have a job. Racing cars is expensive. So let me get the job first, then I'll go race cars. They're like, why don't you just go race cars full time? Make racing cars your job. And it took a few iterations of saying, just, hey, get out there and do it. There's no better time than now. You're young. If you fail, there's always time to come back, learn some lessons and get back at it again. And I said, you know what? Fine. I'm going to go race NASCAR then. They're like, really? I'm like, yep. And they're like, okay, go race NASCAR. And that was it. So I went to the very next, networking event. And when we were going through introductions, hey, stand up, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you want to do. And I said, well, I appreciate you guys having me, and I'm actually going to go race NASCAR. And everyone kind of, chuckled and laughed. We got a class clown here. And I'm like, nope, we're actually doing it. And they're like, oh, well, that's cool, I guess. Don't know anything about it, but good luck to you. And then, so it was eventful, to say the least.
Was that a motivation for you?
Yeah, no, 100%. Every time in I think it comes from a lot of SEALs that go in. There's people that say you can't do it. Even in your own family, maybe people are like, okay, glad that you're dreaming about it, but let's pick something realistic. And every time I hear about that, man, it lights me up, and I love it because I've got that much more drive to go and get it done. And so, the same thing with people saying, hey, you're not going to be a SEAL, but it's cool that you want to try. And then you go and crush it, and then you come back and you're like, what's the next coolest thing I can do?
Right.
Let's go race in NASCAR. Hey, that's a cool idea, but it's not sustainable. How about you come back and let's get you in business? Okay, you know what? Now I'm going to go do it. So,
do you remember your first race and what that feeling was like?
Oh yeah, it was just like getting into, the helo on your very first op. You know what I mean? Like, nervous. You've got all these other, veterans out there, so to speak. And when I say veterans, I'm racing against young kids out there right now. So, they know so much more than me, and I'm like, I'm supposed to be the one that knows all this, not them. And so it was definitely, it was nerve-wracking, but we went into it with a plan of, hey, just finish the race. Like, nobody's expecting you to win, and with the equipment that you were able to afford, you can't win anyway. Unless the entire field of cars was to wreck out and you're the only one left. That's how you win, but it ain't gonna happen. So the first race, man, it was glory all over again to be able to accomplish something awesome like that and just get your foot in the door and get started and gain that giant momentum, of getting over that first hump. So, and I think that's what a lot of people need to do, is just grab that first little bit of momentum to pursue your dreams. But it takes you stepping into it, a little bit fearlessly to just go and get it done. And there's a lot of people that hesitate on it and never do it. And what they didn't know is they just needed to make it over that first little hump.
Right.
And, the world's your oyster after that.
So what's the ultimate goal? I mean, do you want to race at Daytona, Talladega, whatever it is? I mean, is this what we're working towards?
Oh, yeah. So we're actually we're doing a test in January at Daytona. And then the ultimate goal is, I think we put a timeline on it, 4 to 5 years to be racing in the Top Cup Series. And that's quite ambitious if you were to ask anybody, but it's again, once you get the mindset in place, there's nothing that can stop you except you. So,
well, that's amazing, man. I mean, it's unreal. As you said, first ever SEAL to become a NASCAR driver, and I understand as well you're trying for your helicopter pilot's license.
Yeah, so that's always been kind of something that I'm like, hey, it'd be cool to, I had an officer going through BUD/S that was a pilot. Literally during off weekends in BUD/S, he would go rent a plane and go fly. And I'm like, how cool would it be able to, have that freedom to just go fly somewhere? And now I'm like, I want to try helicopters too. So there's so many things that I'm like slowly trying to prioritize and get it out of the way. And the helicopters pilot is just kind of one of those things that I know I can chip away at real slow right now while I'm doing, the initial NASCAR stuff. And hopefully by the time, 4 or 5 years down the road, we're also a halfway decent pilot.
Right. Well, Taylor, listen, it's clear that, adrenaline is kind of your drug, and, the physical and mental challenges of everything that you're going for have certainly motivated you through. And I have no doubt that from talking to you that you'll reach all your goals one way or another, because you've got that mental fortitude to get through it all. We wish you nothing but the best of luck, man. It's an incredible journey, an incredible story. We certainly appreciate you joining us here on Kill the Quit.
Oh man, I appreciate you guys having me. I tell you what, we'll do another interview here in a few years and see where my progress been.
That's awesome. Well, we wish you the best of luck. Taylor Canfield, thanks for being part of Kill the Quit, brought to you by Killcliff.
Thanks, man. We'll see you guys soon.
WFON
and W292 EV Marietta,
a Dickey broadcasting station.
live from the Wellstar Health System Studios.
1230 and 106.3 FM, The Sports X.